Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for joining us for this session. My name is Ken Stone. I am a board member for STN. However, I've been a presenter and a judge for STN from year one. I've had a long history with this organization. And so that's why I can say without hesitation that it is an honor and a privilege that we're able to have Al Tompkins here with us once again to do a presentation. I could give you his bio, but you've read it, and Al, I think, is probably tired of hearing it. But the one thing I would like to say is, especially for teachers out there, you should check out his book, Aim for the Heart. It is one of those journalism books that actually is useful in the classroom and useful to working journalists. So there is my plug there. This is the second of 3 sessions that Al is doing on this topic today, and all the sessions are being recorded and will be available to STN affiliates later on. So it's an hour and 15 minutes long. One of the things, Zoom is wonderful, but one of the things that is a limitation is Al, I understand, cannot see the chat function while he is sharing screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit at the back of the room, so to speak, and I will be monitoring the chat function. However, that said, I have also given all of you, and will give you all of you, the ability to speak. Please put yourself on mute for the time being, but you can do this one of 2 ways. You can hit chat, and then I'm going to interrupt and say, Al, we have a comment or a question from Fred, or you can just speak up, and Al will take the question. I think I've covered all the. Yep, I think I've covered it all. Once again, thank you for joining us, and Al, take it away. Al, you are on mute. And folks, this is really no different than a typical room when the speaker is there and the AV system is not working, the overhead is not working, that kind of thing. So I think we got it now.
Hold on just a second. I'm still.
We can hear you.
Yeah, but you're not hearing what I'm trying to get you to hear. Hang on a second. Now you should be able to hear something very different. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. For whatever reason, this version of Zoom resets audio every time you come on. It's just bizarre. Hold on. Now we should be better. All right, good. So we want to make this as interactive as possible. The beauty of having a small group is that you can make it highly interactive. So please do ask questions as we go along. We're going to walk down some interesting paths so that I imagine some of you have never walked down before. We're going to talk some about the dark web. We're going to talk some about conspiracy websites and things like that. We'll go down the trail of QAnon to try to demystify that a little bit for you. QAnon made a little news today, as a matter of fact, so I'll try to use some of that as examples of how all this works. We're also going to look at how you go about detecting fake information like photos and videos. So we got a lot to do, and please do stop me as we go along and ask questions that would be useful to you. As always, I always tell, particularly you educators, but those of you students who are putting in the time to do this, know this, that I'm totally willing to share these presentations with you for your teaching. I just think that's what teachers do for each other. So if you want me to share any of this stuff with you, please just send me an email, Tompkins@pointer, Poynter.org, Tompkins, Tompkins @pointer.org. And if you want me to share the presentation with you, tell me if you want it in PowerPoint or Keynote. I use Keynote, but I can convert it. Or if you just want a PDF, I can do that. So whatever you want. All right. One of the big things for us to keep in mind is before you share anything, ask a number of questions, right? Who's behind it? What's the evidence? What are other trustworthy sources saying? These are sort of the routine boilerplate questions that I always try to push journalists and educators and others to be thinking about. Um, to discover the truth, you have to ask the right questions. And this is one of the things um, that I want to try to help accomplish today is that you also have to be open to facts that you don't like. If you earnestly want to discover truth, you have to be open to the truth however you find it, not just try to affirm what you already want. The whole idea of sort of a false affirmation doesn't get us anywhere. So let me ask you, I'm going to look here. I got Brody. Brody, flip on your microphone, would you?
Hi,
Hi, yeah, Brody. How are you?
I'm doing well.
And where are you physically? Where are you?
I'm in Hawaii,
Oh
Kauai.
yeah, in Hawaii. So you're my second Hawaii student today. All right. So Brody, I'm going to give you three versions of the same question. Let me walk through the questions first, and then you tell me how are they different. First, how honest is that candidate? Second question, how dishonest is that candidate? Third question, how frustrated are you by how dishonest that candidate is? Brody, what's the difference in those three questions?
Um, how you worded it, like, basically, I don't actually really know.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you detect any bias in that third question?
Yeah.
Oh, what bias do you detect?
I see that, um, depends on how you're feeling with that candidate. You can say how frustrated or not frustrated you are.
Do you surmise that I believe the candidate is dishonest?
Uh, no.
Am I giving you any chance to say you don't think that candidate is dishonest?
Actually, no.
No. I've set it up so that we've already established by the way I asked the question, I set it up by saying, how frustrated are you by how dishonest that candidate is? I'm not asking you whether you think they're dishonest. I'm asking you how angry you are that they're so dishonest. And therein lies the problem. It's not a straightforward question. It's a question that, because of the wording I've used, it is biased on its face. It's biased. What about the second one? How dishonest is that candidate? Is that biased as well?
Um, yes, because you don't know, which one is honest or not.
If I said, how dishonest do you think Brody is? Would you take offense at that question?
Yes,
Why?
because I feel as if you feel like I'm lying and my opinions or facts are not
There's a
valid.
real, yeah, it implies there's a real reason to be asking the question. Even if I ask the group, all of you know Brody, how honest is she? Even that has a certain taint to it, doesn't it? Because I'm asking something, there must be a reason, right? And so all of these have their own slant to them, even the first one, which on its face may sound like it's kind of an honest question, but it's not. It's not a straightforward question. It very much is an opinionated question, even while it pretends to be something else. And so, what would be another way of asking that question? Well, one way, if you were a pollster, for example, you might say, I'm going to give you a list of candidates running for president. On a 1 to 10 scale, rank these candidates. 1, very dishonest, to 10, very honest. And that way, The person who's answering the question would have no way of knowing which candidate you're particularly interested in, right? Everybody gets an honest measurement, if you will. And so you have to think about, how are we asking these questions? When you are trying to evaluate, when you see a study or a poll, for example, you always want to go and look at the question. How was the question asked? What did they ask? And then there are a number of other things like sample sizes and when it was asked and so on. But the first big question for you is what did they actually ask? And was that a question that that would actually give me an honest answer? Um, this is a finding from a guy named Bill Dance, who is a disinformation researcher, a person who researches this whole genre of communication. And Dance says that people who engage with disinformation are much more likely to use these search words when they go on an internet search, like a Google search. They search with words like false or concealed or reveal or charade, disguised, exposed, and so on. So Dance's research shows that people who are involved with disinformation, people who believe conspiracy theories, are generally interested in truth. It's not that they're disinterested in truth, it's they're hyper interested in truth. But the techniques they use to find truth aren't honest, even handed techniques. They are only actually looking for confirmatory evidence. They're trying to confirm what they already believe, and no amount of evidence would be enough to dissuade them from that belief. So let me give you an example as to how this shows up. If you went to Google, just for example, and you put in coronavirus facts as your search phrase, it's going to give you factual returns like stop the spread of rumors from the CDC or from the World Health Organization and so on. It's going to give you factual COVID information because that's what you ask for, facts. But if you put in a search phrase that looked like this, the real truth about coronavirus, or who's really behind coronavirus, or is the government lying about the coronavirus? Why are they lying about the coronavirus? Now you're starting to see versions of the question that are very much like that third example that Brody sniffed out for us, that they sound like real questions, but they're not. They're actually couched in an opinion. Why are they lying? We're not even opening the door to the idea that they're not lying. What we're searching for is why would they lie, right? It's very similar to how frustrated are you about how dishonest that candidate is. And so you have to be conscious of what you're asking the search engines to give you in return. Are you asking for a fact, or are you asking for some theory, some truth, that the real truth, as if there is some other truth, right? And so all Google is trying to do is give you what it thinks you want. And if any of these questions, Google would naturally think that you're trying to get to some conspiracy thing. So that's what it's going to give you in return. But if you ask for facts, it will give you facts. It's just trying to please you, that's all. Google Facts then give you facts. Google Truth will give you things like this. Doctors Against Vaccines, for example, which is a conspiracy group that says vaccines are bad for you. Deaths by Vaccines, which is healthinfo.care, which is run by a guy who's a big time anti-vaxxer. So it's important for you to recognize that a web search will give you what you ask for. And you have to use precise search terms in order to get factual information. The big idea, when your search includes words such as data and facts, you're much more likely to get objective results. Objective meaning factual results. So let's take a look at a rumor that made its way around the globe, actually. And I actually predicted this pretty early on during the pandemic, that these were the kinds of stories that were going to make it. So here's Patricia from Austin, um, who was in the Pfizer drug trial. So she was supposed to get a vaccination, and she was not told when she got that vaccination, whether it was real or whether it was fake, because obviously they give both. So she was among a lot of people who ended up getting these shots, not knowing whether they were real or not. Not long after that, um, she ended up getting these really nasty, and I've got that white circle around it so you don't have to look at it, but she got these really awful looking, um, I don't even know what you call them. What do you call them? Some sort of uh, skin problem, and more than one. And so the question was, did the shot that they gave her cause this? And that was a huge story. One doctor told her it might be a drug reaction. She posted that her social media page that she had these uh, uh, damages all over, and that it was right after she had gotten the shot, and that there was one doctor who said that it could be, reaction to that. Then GoFundMe raised more than $5,000 for her to be able to get more doctors to take a look at this. Um, this was also shared thousands of times. So this rumor that it was going on, that somehow or another this vaccine that she got uh, also created these problems for her, just was all over the place. Pfizer actually opened its blind uh, uh, study files, something that it just never does. So generally what happens is that you've got Pfizer and other drug companies, and they give some people the real shot, and then they give some people a fake shot. And you will not know while this is going on who got what. It's a huge secret, a very big deal. But this got to be so serious and so rumored that Pfizer opened up its files to find out which one she got. And it turned out that she did not get vaccinated. She got a placebo shot. And so whatever was going on with her was not actually medically related to the vaccine. But by then, the story was global, and rumors were flying around that the vaccine was very harmful, that the vaccine would cause very serious skin problems and infections. And it was huge online that this vaccine was going to be just awful for you. And it's the last thing that Pfizer and others, Moderna, needed, was more doubt that it already existed. Now it actually had photographs. And so one of the questions for us is, what do we do about this? What do we do about these kinds of stories? How do we cover these stories? I've seen multiple stories, for example, of people who got the vaccine, the Moderna or the Pfizer vaccine, in nursing homes, for example, or senior citizens. Mostly are the people who have gotten this now, senior citizens and healthcare workers. But I've seen multiple stories about senior citizens or people who were living in nursing homes who died after they got the vaccine. And the story sort of stops from there. Jack was 72 years old, 74 years old, and got the vaccine and then died. and then just sort of leaves it there as if there is some sort of causation that happened, that somehow the person died because of that. Well, the fact is, uh, he's 72, 74, 76 years old. He's, average life expectancy, people that age die. And it's not that unusual, particularly if they have underlying health concerns, that they die. People die in health facilities all the time. They die in senior citizen centers all the time. And so it's not really unusual that a person in a senior citizen center would die. That's what happens when you reach a certain age. But the publicity that's been given to some of these numbers is just incredible. Um, so you've probably seen headlines like this, like the New York Times reporting that Facebook had removed a bunch of QAnon groups and that Twitter had taken down QAnon groups and so on. What is QAnon all about? Well, QAnon, by the way, made news today. It was actually trending on Twitter today. And let me give you an example. Well, first, I'll explain a little bit about who QAnon is and what QAnon is, and then I'll tell you why they made news today. This is just a short little minute and a half video that kind of gives you a flavor for what QAnon's about. Let me play it for you, and then I'll come back and take it a little further.
The heart of the QAnon belief system is that almost everyone in power in the United States is part of a secret cabal, a deep state.
Donald Trump was picked by military leaders to run for president as a way to kind of bring down the deep state,
which is affiliated with all sorts of misbehavior, not limited to child trafficking. Donald Trump, in the QAnon view, is going to save us from this in a moment called the storm. And the belief is that the storm is coming.
What storm, Mr. President?
You'll find out.
The storm is supposed to be a moment where all of these evildoers, Democrats, bureaucrats, all sorts of media figures are going to be arrested and put in front of military trials in Guantanamo, and America will be restored to its former greatness.
We are finally putting America first.
Since 2017, a person or group calling themselves Q has been posing as a government insider online, posting what followers see as clues about this imaginary war. Nearly all of these clues, including that Hillary Clinton was arrested and John Kennedy Jr. is alive, turn out to be wrong, but the batting average doesn't seem to matter.
You think he's still alive? Oh, absolutely.
In a short time, the conspiracy theory has spread, from fringe internet forum to mainstream MAGA memes and Facebook feeds to the real world.
QAnon is a creature of the internet that desperately seeks legitimation in the physical world, and particularly in the real world of Washington, D.C. For QAnon believers, there would be very little to celebrate more than having someone come to the U.S. Senate who stated a belief in QAnon. There's no victory like that.
So QAnon, mostly until January, was just sort of noisy nonsense. QAnon took something of a different position after a number of people who were part of the Capitol riot were also serious QAnon followers, including the woman who was killed breaking into the House of Representatives. So QAnon now, in the last month or so, has taken on a very different kind of stature, in that it once was just considered to be a bunch of, nuts who believed in all kinds of conspiracies, but now they're widely seen as being more dangerous than we might have before. I said that QAnon was making news today. There is a rumor, the newest QAnon rumor is that March 4th will be the day that Donald Trump is sworn into office. QAnon, you got to kind of make a little bit of space for this unbelievably crazy stuff. But the theory is that Every president since Ulysses Grant has been an illegitimate president because that was when we came off of the gold standard. And so in 1871. And so um, every president every president that followed Ulysses Grant has been an illegitimate president, and every constitutional amendment after the 16th Amendment is not valid. So this is also based on another theory that you probably have heard somebody talk about called the sovereign citizen theory, which is also complete nonsense. There's one more part of the theory, and that is that until the last 7,500 years, they used to inaugurate presidents in March. So March 4th is the new date. Well, how seriously do QAnoners take this? The Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C. has quadrupled its daily rates for the 3rd and 4th of March. That's how many people they are expecting. So there's always something, and it doesn't matter how many times this turns out to be absolute nonsense. They're still waiting for something. Who is QAnon? Don't know. Nobody kind of knows. It could be a person, it could be a group, it could be all sorts of things. But QAnon generally communicates with followers in these sort of esoteric postings like this. Hard to swallow, important to progress, who are the puppet masters, House of Sod, and so on. This is a typical breadcrumb. And so what happens is people read this, and then they spend hours and hours and hours and hours talking about it and what it means and what it doesn't mean and so on. It's like that. It's incredible. I want to give you a feel for some of this.
QAnon supporter barricaded himself inside an armored vehicle on the Hoover Dam.
Investigators say a fellow QAnon believer, who she called a sniper, had come to live with her, and that fellow QAnon members were planning this raid to kidnap the child.
So far, QAnon is linked to 12 alleged crimes, including the 2016 Pizzagate incident, when a gunman opened fire at a D.C. pizza shop because he falsely believed it was a front for a child sex trafficking ring.
The cops are after me. Don't you understand? I'm trying to protect you.
In June 2020, QAnon follower Alpala Slyman drove off with his 5 children against their will because he believed they were in danger of being abducted.
Donald Trump, I need a miracle or something. Somebody, QAnon, help me.
I'm gonna help you.
QAnon, help me.
How far are you and other Anons willing to go to ensure that the QAnon worldview prevails?
Well, I would say to the ends of the earth. This isn't just about the United States. We are literally rescuing our world from an evil satanic cabal that wants to bring in a new world order, one world government system.
They seem to be pretty serious about this, and it has spread well beyond the United States. At the center of all of this, almost always, is something about the Clinton Foundation or the Clintons. And at the corner, the center of the belief is that somehow, somewhere, somebody's going to arrest the Clintons and put them in Guantanamo. That's almost always, that's the end game of all of this. So I picked up a piece of literature that I thought would be interesting to you. This is a piece of literature that you can buy actually at QAnon gatherings. And I'm only going to put this in front of you just so you can kind of see. This is how they try to link all sorts of different things to each other. To QAnon, everything somehow is linked to something else, right? So, you know, there's 5G somehow is going to, I don't even know what it does. So somehow your phone connection is going to do something to you. The Vegas massacre was linked to the Masonic uprising. That's why it took place in front of the pyramid in Las Vegas. The birth certificate, the Clinton Foundation, that's huge. Benghazi, huge. Selling uranium to the Russians is also a conspiracy that they come up with. It didn't happen. None of this is true, but this is, it's just gets so involved. It gets so detailed that it seems to people who want to believe it that it must be plausible because it's so minute. And therein sort of lies the issue, right? So I'm only sort of bringing this to you just because I want you to understand that it's real in that people earnestly believe these things. Now, some people are just in it for the noise, and some people are just in it for the distraction. But there really do seem to be people who care about such things. Where do these people gather? Well, they gather in a lot of places. Obviously, they gather online, but specifically, you will find in Reddit, you will find subreddits that are QAnon related. 4chan also is another one, 4CHAN. 4chan is another one where they gather. And there are other places you can get a lot of messages on Twitter, for example. But Reddit usually is about the easiest one to follow. That's when I want to see what's going on with QAnon. That's usually where I go. That's where I was reading quite a bit today about the March 4th conspiracy, just because I'm always interested in what's going on with this.
Hal, there's a question.
Else.
A question
Yeah, go
from the
ahead.
back of the room. Bill Phelps. This is Ken Stone, sitting at the back of the room. But Bill
Sure,
Phelps.
go ahead.
Bill Phelps typed in. He wanted to know what WWG 1WGA stands for.
Where we go one, we go all. It's the secret handshake for QAnon members. Where we go one, we go all. That's what WW1WGA stands for. So just as Ku Klux Klan members and others have secret questions, even Alcoholics Anonymous have questions that you can ask another person to see whether or not they are one of you. That's what they ask. So I just gave you the secret handshake for QAnon. I wonder where you saw that. Was that in something I? Anyway,
it was in a number of the number of the pictures of the video.
Yeah.
It kept popping up.
Anyway, that's what it is. It's the secret handshake. Good for you for picking that up. Any other questions before I go on? Let me say that it's really one of the big curiosities about QAnon is where's the money? Because almost always there's got to be a motivation to do all of this, right? And it could be chaos, and it could be politics, it could be those. But usually something this big that's been going on this long. I mean, I've been talking about QAnon for well over 2 years, maybe 3 years. I've been talking about forever. But it really didn't catch on much until kind of the fall of this year. And Donald Trump really never talks about QAnon. In fact, he often says he doesn't know anything about it. But he never really talked to QAnon in conventions. He doesn't say, okay, QAnon, or, use any of the secret handshake stuff. Once in a while, he would point to people wearing a Q t-shirt, or the white rabbit is the other logo. So the white rabbit from Alice in Wonderland is the other big logo. And once in a while, he would point to them, or he would say something like he did in that news conference, that the storm is coming. But mostly he never did. He never really said anything directly about it. So it's difficult to have a direct connection between the president and QAnon because it seems to have happened quite a bit.
Al, we have another question, and it comes from Tom Gruskin, and he said, have you ever convinced someone that QAnon isn't true, or have you heard of someone who has been able to do so?
Quite a number of people now, particularly after the Capitol Hill insurrection, have said, that they're sorry they've spent so much time on QAnon and so on like that. I don't make it my time. I don't make it my effort to convince somebody to believe or not believe something. My job is to give you evidence, and if you're willing to look into it, good. If you're not, then that's your choice. But I've never thought it was my choice. It was my duty to convince you to believe or not believe something. If you are not open to another way of looking at something, there's nothing I can do to convince you. I'm not going to waste my time doing it. And that's kind of the way I live my life. Is there's no reason for me. I actually have done some really interesting public hearings, public outreach. I did one in Knoxville, Tennessee, right before the pandemic, where I had, I don't know, it's probably 100, 150 people. No signups, just show up. Anybody can come in. And I have these kinds of conversations with them about fake information. And I know that a fair number of people there are followers of QAnon and similar conspiracy theories. And, you know, they want to come in and fight. And I just say, look, every single thing I show you, I will show you my source. All I would ask is the same from you. If you tell me that something is true, what I want to know is, how do you know? I need sources. If you don't give me sources, I've got no reason to believe it. And of course, they don't have a source. And that's the problem, right? All right, so let's move on a little bit to look at some of these others. Now that we've sort of raised the bar a little bit to say, you've got to ask better questions, let's try. So, sorry, I may have messed something up in that I may have gotten rid of. Yeah, I did. Okay, good. All right. So there was a story on CBS News, and note the date, May 17th. So I want you to note the date because there's a reason to note the date. You'll think of it in a second. On May 17th, there was a study that was released that said half of Americans admit using the swimming pool in lieu of a shower. Let me give you the first paragraph of it. Let's see. So Matthew, since your microphone is almost open, Matthew, can you open your microphone? Great, there you are. All right, so let me read this paragraph, and then what I want you to do is to tell me 3 facts that you get out of this, out of these 2 paragraphs, okay? With summer right around the corner, Americans are ready to kick off a season of sunshine and swimming. But before you jump into the water, beware. A new study exposes some bad habits that contribute to dirty swimming pools. The online survey found that more than half of U.S. adults say they have at some time gotten into a pool as a substitute for showering or to rinse off after exercise. Give me 3 facts in this.
I'll be honest, I don't know if I can give you 3. I'll give you 1. Summer's right around the corner.
Okay, so we know that summer's right around the corner. Go to the second sentence. There's a fact there.
Well, they're saying that a new survey exposes some bad habits that contribute.
Yeah, exactly. It's a fact that there's a new survey, and then go to the next sentence and give me 1 more fact.
It says that there's an online survey also that finds another fact.
So we know it's an online survey. Yeah. And what did the online survey find?
Half of adults say they have at some point gotten into a pool.
Perfect. So, so you've actually got 5 facts that you've identified, right? So, let me ask you, just think out loud with me for a second. Is there a holiday that happens more or less around that time of year?
Yeah, that'd be Memorial Day.
Memorial Day. So why would it be interesting that there is a study about swimming pools right around Memorial Day?
Well, I would say that there would be nobody should be in a swimming pool unless they're an indoor swimming pool in the previous couple of months. So I find it suspicious. I would be curious who does that study.
Okay, that's a really great question. Let's keep that one in mind as we go forward. So this is obviously timed toward Memorial Day. Yep. And sometimes studies come out right before a big holiday or something. And one reason is because they know that journalists are hungry for stories. They're going to have to work on Memorial Day, and they'd love to have a juicy little story they could work on.
And May is sweeps month, isn't it? May is sweeps.
May is sweeps month. So if you could say that people are swimming in dirty pools, that'd be pretty cool. All right, so let's go to the next couple of paragraphs. And once again, Matt, I'm going to ask you to reveal some facts here. The survey revealed even more nasty findings. Almost a quarter of those surveyed said they'd go to a swimming pool within an hour of having diarrhea. 48% said they never shower before swimming. And the CDC advises all swimmers to stay out of the pool if they have diarrhea, as this can contaminate the pool with feces and germs, which will make other people sick. Everyone should also rinse off before entering the swimming pool. When it comes to making sure your water is safe to swim in, the CDC recommends taking matters into your own hands. Pool goers can use a test strip available at most pool supply stores or free on the Water Quality and Health's Healthy Pool Campaign website to determine if the pH and free chlorine or bromide concentration are correct. All right. In the first paragraph, do you see a fact? Give it to me.
Well, they're claiming a quarter of those surveyed said they'd go swimming within an hour of diarrhea, or a little less than half.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Go to the next paragraph. Give me a fact.
Well, CDC, that seems like a reliable source to me. Advises that you stay out of the pool if you have diarrhea. Yep.
Good. And the final one?
Everyone should rinse off, according to the CDC.
Yeah.
And you can get a test strip at those places.
Good. And so by quoting the CDC, it makes this all look very official, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. And they also have something called the Water Quality and Health Council, which sounds pretty official. It sounds like it's, when I say Water Quality and Health Council, Matthew, what do you assume they are? Who are they?
Well, they're making it seem like there's a bunch of scientists who, environmental scientists and doctors.
Sort of sounds like an EPA thing, doesn't it? I mean, it sounds very official. And so that's one of the things for us to say is, like, I'm not entirely sure who that is. And we still have to satisfy Matthew's question as to who paid for this study or who did the study. So we know that the study was actually presented, the survey was actually presented by the Water Quality and Health Council. How do we know that? I actually went and looked at the survey. And so it's also interesting to me that as I look for this story, I find that news departments all over the world are quoting this story. From San Francisco to Salt Lake City to New York City, WebMD, even the Louisiana Department of Health, you name them, they're there. Weather Channel, you name them, everybody is using this study. This is one more couple of passages. This is from the actual study. When dirt, sweat, personal care products, and other things in our body react with chlorine, there's less chlorine available to kill germs, says Dr. Chris Waint from the Water Quality and Health Council. The Water Quality and Health Council. So we got a doctor there, Matthew. Does that make you feel better about this, that the Water Quality and Health Council has a doctor?
Well, I'd love to know what kind of doctor he is.
What do you mean?
It could be a doctor of education.
So that wouldn't make him an expert on what could he be an expert on?
Well, I mean, they're making it seem like he's a doctor who knows chlorine's effect on germs, like an infection.
Yeah, I mean, and he might be a podiatrist. We don't know what he is.
Right.
And so let's look at the Water Quality and Health Council website and see what we can find out. And here's what you would find at the bottom of the page. The Water Quality and Health Council is an independent multidisciplinary group sponsored by the Chemistry Division of the American Chemistry Council, an industry trade association. The Chlorine Chemistry Division. So who actually paid for this study about chlorine?
The chemical, the people who are selling chlorine to the pools.
And why would they pay for such a study saying chlorine is great?
Well, the same reason why you have studies on sugar being great or chocolate being great. I would assume it would be to sell more product.
Well,
or to get it out there,
or at least to support the product you have, right?
Yeah.
And so, look, it doesn't mean the study is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It just means that before I eat this, I want to know what it is, right? Before I run this story, I need to understand who did the study, who paid for the study, and would they have released the study if the study had said chlorine is awful for you? So who did the study? Well, we know that it was conducted by a group called the Sachs Media Group, that it was done April 12th through 13th, that it had 3,100 American adults. We know that it was online. They actually are quite famous for doing these kinds of studies about chlorine. They do them every year, and they release them the weekend prior to, or the week prior to Memorial Day every year. And every year journalists run them. And every year the study says that chlorine is great. It's really, really good. It's so safe. And people run them. In fact, the Sachs Media Group, which is in Tallahassee, Florida, actually said that the whole point of doing this campaign was to improve chlorine's brands nationwide and to help educate regulators to keep them from developing policies for chlorine alternatives. It was always a marketing campaign to promote chlorine and to brush back any legislative effort to regulate chlorine. And yet journalists did not run it that way. After I wrote about this, only one news organization that had written about it ended up doing a clarifying piece, and that was the CBS News Group that I showed you first off here. All the rest of them, not any of them, made any notation later saying that the study that they had quoted in the story was paid for by the Chlorine Council. I think it's incredible. But I see this kind of thing a lot these days, especially with the COVID stories. I see them a lot. Just today, for example, there was an interesting study from some researchers at LSU and University of New Mexico. And they were looking at variants. But the study that's been widely quoted, it was quoted on CNN multiple times today, has not been peer reviewed. It has not gone through the usual peer review that you would expect these kinds of very sophisticated studies about variants of the virus to have gone through. So there's just so much we don't know, and we have to ask. So in the earlier session, I talked about lateral reading. And what I mean by lateral reading is let one thing take you to another thing, take you to another thing, so that you can actually walk through a process. In this case, we started with the CBS News story. We went to the source of the study. We looked at the money behind the study, and then we're able to get to more of the truth. The big idea: who's behind the information? What's the evidence? What are other trustworthy sources saying? Sorry, I'm going to go down. All right.
And there is a question that we have from Matthew
Go ahead.
about the study. Was the study picked up by the AP?
No.
He was just wondering why it was in so many different places.
No, it wasn't picked up by the AP. It was in it was run pretty widely by a public relations press release group, and people just picked it up. They picked it up off the press release, and then sort of once it got picked up by any news department, others started seeing it. It started trending on social. It got a lot of, some radio stations picked it up, and, it just sort of got talked about. People sort of chatted about it a lot. So these things happen, particularly when it's around a holiday or when it's around an event, when it's around something that's a hot topic. they just sort of take on a life of their own. And one of the fascinating things, this is a really great study. If I were walking this study with high school students, one of the studies that I think is just fascinating is there is a study involving the Nike Fly, and it's a shoe, a tennis shoe, and Nike claimed that people, marathoners running with the shoe, were running 4 to 5% faster using the Nike Fly, which is an extraordinary claim. Is it possible to have a shoe that makes you run 5% faster? And so there was a big study of these things that was done, and it turned out the study was actually done by Nike. It was paid for by Nike. And so people then really trashed the study. Well, here's the thing. It turns out that the study was a pretty valid study. And it turns out now that almost 2 years of data with thousands of marathon runners who have switched shoes from something else to the Nike Fly, it turns out that the Nike Fly does seem to have the potential for elite runners to make them run faster. And it's so controversial that the marathon runner body, the governing board for marathon runners, is considering outlawing, banning the Nike Fly because it may give an advantage to the people who wear it. So it's the New York Times, if you're interested in that, the New York Times has done some extraordinary testing on the Nike Fly, has done thousands of data points trying to show what happens in different weather for different distances, different runners, people who have changed from this to that, so on. It really does look like the Nike Fly actually, for elite runners, makes a difference. For people who are not elite runners, for people who are not in the upper echelon of running, it doesn't do any good. And the reason that it does work, apparently, is that the Nike Fly has a little piece of titanium in it. And it turns out that that the scientific study that's been done on this is they find out that marathon runners, when they run, put a tremendous amount of pressure in the down force, and that little piece of titanium has the ability to give you more force coming up than you put down. So it's a little bit like those blade runners who are amputees and have those blades, and they actually can run faster than before. And that seems to be what's going on, is that they're getting more physical energy out of this little tiny piece of titanium than they're putting in. But when you're running at that level, any advantage is an advantage. And there also was a theory that just the mental part of thinking that you have an advantage was giving you an advantage. So it's a fascinating study, but the reason I bring it to you is because so often you can do these kinds of things where this is just not true. You could, for example, use the study that I showed you with the swimming pools, and then you can put a study like the Nike Fly study in front of your students and say, well, what do you think of this? And they'll say, well, it's a lie. It's not true. Well, no, it is true. Actually, it does seem to be true. And I think those are always interesting when you can show that it's not always yes and it's not always no. It all depends on the circumstances. I'll pause just for a second and see if there's any other questions, and then I'll go on to another case here. Okay. I thought you'd be interested in this one. It's out of Detroit, and it happened right after Election Day. This is the person who's sitting in a car at, I'm going to make up a time, but it's about right. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. It's outside of the convention center in Detroit. In the convention center is where they are counting ballots. And so this person is sitting outside of the convention center and thinks that they are capturing something on video.
Looks like one of those lock boxes. I wish I could tell.
And so what he's doing is capturing this video of this person with this red wagon and a box that's being loaded out of a white van, and he posts it on a Stop the Steal website saying, at 2:00 in the morning, again, I just made up the time, it could have been 1 or 3, I can't remember, captured this video of this person loading what looks to be a box of ballots and carrying them in to the convention center. The suggestion was that this was a bunch of ballots for Biden that they needed to get in there so that they could offset Trump's win. And people went nuts. I mean, nuts, and said, this is just one more example of them wheeling in these ballots and so on. So in a video taken by Kelly Surreal, a Texas lawyer, member of Lawyers for Trump, a white van is seen in parked location 2:40 a.m. Box is taken out of the van, placed into a red wagon, which is then pulled inside the facility. Sorrell is raising alarms that the box may have been a ballot box that arrived long after the ballots were expected to have been received in the counting facility. Except they weren't. It turns out that, well, you can experience it for yourself.
I do want to show you
This is a television station in Detroit, WXYZ.
I do want to show you a piece of video that has been circulating online. It has been viewed millions of times, and it's extremely misleading. So we wanted to show you to it now. It shows a man rolling a wagon into the TCF Center here yesterday. The website where the video is posted insinuates that perhaps the wagon was carrying a ballot box long after ballots should have arrived here at the TCF Center. Now, that insinuation is false, and the reason we know that is because the man wheeling that wagon, he's a photographer here at Channel 7, and the wagon, we have it right here. This is what it looks like. It was carrying, as it is now, equipment for our crews who were working long hours here yesterday. So we just wanted to clear that up for you and dispel any misinformation out there.
If you were to look even today, if you were to Google even today, sneaking red wagon, you would find references to this. This is part of the proof that that the Trump administration tried to use to show that the votes had been stolen, and so on. And this rumor persists even today. The person was a photographer for WXYZ, and he was rolling his camera gear into the place using that very wagon. And this is the sort of thing that gets going, because seeing is believing, and people believe it if they see it. And if it's taken undercover, boy, it's even more believable, right? And they want to believe it. They want it to be true. So they're just looking for affirmation to what they already believe. And no amount of proof is going to be enough. I want to show you a couple of other things that I thought would really pique your interest, and that is how incredibly easy it is to alter an image. It's always been doable. For over 100 years, we've been able to alter photographs, but it's always been a little clunky and time-consuming, and usually detectable. But now what used to take hours can be accomplished in literal seconds, and I'm going to do it in front of you. So this is a photograph that I took. My wife and I went on a tour of the West not that long ago, and I became really interested, particularly while we were in the Sequoia National Forest. I was fascinated by the history of people carving names and initials and stuff into historic things. So I was looking at these magnificent redwood trees and people having some need to carve their initials into it. So let's say, for example, and so I started documenting some of the more interesting carvings. Let's say, for example, that I had this photograph and I wanted it not to say MEV or MED, but instead I just wanted it to say heart me, I love me, right? how easy would that be? All I'd have to do is to pull the photo into Photoshop. So this is Adobe Photoshop. And I'm going to use a tool called Content Aware Fill. And Content Aware Fill has been around a while, but it's gotten a lot better because now not only is it looking for aberrant content, it's also measuring the texture that it's trying to replace with, and it's much more accurate. So let me just show you real quick. I'm just going to drag my cursor down. I'm going to make it a little bigger. And so let me get rid of some things. I'll get rid of that, for example, just go over it and then let off, and it just replaces it with what it says looks like the background wood grain that would have been there. Let's get rid of that scar, for example. Boom, got it. Why don't we go over to the initials now and get rid of that one and just release, and there it is. And so now instead of MEB or MEO, it just says me. And so in a period of seconds, I'm able to take one thing and turn it into something else. And that's called content aware fill. And as I say, content aware fill has been around for several years to be able to do this. But now we have a different tool. Content aware fill now makes it much easier for you to get rid of people. It recognizes people shapes. So it knows that one reason that people love content aware fill is they like to remove people or sometimes duplicate people or even add people to a photograph. So if, for example, I have these three people and I want to get rid of the person on the left, all I'd have to do is click on that person and it will define that person. Just in one click, it just defines that person just like that. And now all I got to do is just delete them. And it gets rid of that individual. But more than that, it inserts something behind them. Now, in this case, it's what I would call an artifact. And so there's a little bit of remnant behind them that doesn't look very believable. If you can see, for example, right there, that circle is around something that it doesn't look real. And the remnant behind it back there, what I'm going to do is take that, the arrow, and I'm going to put that kind of where the circle is. So it's a little more believable. So with one click, all I got to do is just fix that by putting that one plant back over where that unbelievable edge was. And now I have a really nice looking two-person shot. So what was three people now is just two people. So imagine just for a second, you've got a photograph of world leaders and somebody's missing, you got a photograph of somebody who says, I wasn't there. Here's a photograph that proves it, right? Look, we all know that sometimes photographs can be altered, but it's never been as easy as it is today or as believable as it is today. Here's another thing that the new version of Content Aware Fill allows you to do. It used to be that you would have to click over something to mostly get rid of it. But now Content Aware Fill also has an additive function. So in this case, I've got a moth that is missing part of a wing. But because it's a symmetrical shape, all I got to do now is click on it and it will add the same shape as occurs on the other side. See, it reads that this is a symmetrical shape. It's got the same shape right down the middle twice. And so it says, oh, I see what you want. You want a wing. And so it just grabs from the other wing and lays it in there with one click. It's incredible. And again, this is Content Aware Fill. It's part of Photoshop. I feel like one of those 1-800 infomercials, but wait, there's more. The new version of Adobe Premiere, so the 2021 version of Adobe Premiere, has now taken Content Aware Fill and applied it to video. And what I can do now is I'm going to show you video of this person and the writer going up and down a beach. what we're going to do is the same kind of definition. So we're just going to click on the person and the rider. I'm sorry, the rider and the horse. But more important than that, we're also going to click on the shadow that they're casting. Okay. So we're gonna keep the waves going back and forth, because remember, this is video. So the waves are going to keep going back and forth because we're not altering those. All we're going to do is click on the person, the horse, and the shadow that the person and the horse are casting, and we're going to get rid of that. So let's do that. So that's the person and the horse and the shadow. So all you got to do is define it once, and it captures it. And then off you go. Now look, can you notice that the footprints are still being made, the hoof prints are still being made in the sand? So what's making those hoof prints? We don't know, because we just content aware filled the horse. It's incredible. And one of the things to notice, and it just took, what, 15 seconds. One of the things to notice is that in the past, it's been really difficult to do this in a believable way, because you'd have to marry two screens together, really, a vacant screen and the moving screen of the ocean. But now I don't have to do any marrying at all. All I'm doing is just getting rid of it, just by, and I don't have to define it in each frame. So if it was 30 seconds, I wouldn't have to do 30 frames times 30 seconds, 900 frames, right? In this case, all I have to do is define it once, and it says, okay, fine, I know what you want. And it gets rid of all of it in a nanosecond, just gets rid of all of it. It's incredible. Now, you should know that any time you use one of these tools, there's always a record of it that's kept in what's called metadata, M-E-T-A, metadata. And the metadata is explorable. And we're going to go deeper into metadata in my third session this evening. That starts in, I don't know, 45 minutes or so, top of the hour. But the lack of fact checking also is an important piece. So in the next session, we'll talk about metadata, but I want to show why it's so important that we actually do fact checking. So this is a case out of Baltimore. And this was in about 2 weeks, I guess, after the George Floyd death. And there was a young girl, 14, 15 years old, who was going down a bicycle trail outside of Baltimore. And she was taping up 8.5 by 11 signs that said Black Lives Matter. That's all the signs said, Black Lives Matter. And this happened.
Leave her alone. Do not touch her. Do not touch her. She has nothing. Do not touch her, sir. Leave her alone. Sarah, just walk away. Hey! Hey! Get off of her! Just get out of here. What? Hey! What the?
So this video became a viral sensation. I mean, it was everywhere. It was on social. It made news. It was everywhere. Who's this goon who's attacking this child who's just putting up Black Lives Matter signs and so on? And so you can imagine that the online vigilante squads went nuts on this. So first of all, the park police put out this notice. So they went on record. We're seeking the public's assistance in identifying the below individual in reference to an assault that took place this morning on the Capitol Crescent Trail. By the way, you'll notice that Detective Lopez apparently isn't a very good speller. Please contact Detective Lopez at this number with any information. Please, again, misspell, reference case number so-and-so, June 2nd. So notice that according to the police, this occurred on the morning of June 2nd. This is going to be important to us in a few minutes. But you see the still frame images here. So we see an image of the person's face. We see an image of the helmet, a close-up of the helmet, and so on. Well, that's all that the social media vigilantes needed. they went on to an app that maybe some of you use if you're bikers or runners or even walkers. It's called Strava. My wife uses this all the time for bicycle riding to see how far they go and so on. And so Strava is an open source social media app. And if you turn it on while you're riding a bicycle or running or whatever, it'll tell you your route and it'll tell you how fast you went. It'll tell you how many miles you went and so on. Well, it's easy to see that this was a bicycle ride because we can see that the time for traveling 17 miles was 1 hour and 10 minutes. So this was a fairly easy one to find. And so what they did is they went on Strava and they just wanted to find everybody who was on that bicycle trail on that date, June 2nd. And what they found was this guy. And if you go in on the face, you will see the person, and you will see that the person identifies as Peter Weinberg. So people started sending him questions. Are you the same Peter Weinberg as this Strava bicyclist? And he said, yes. And then they started saying, well, that's Peter Weinberg. He's the senior marketing director at ProShares. And they actually gave his latitude and longitude for his home because that's part of his ID on Strava, is his latitude and longitude. So now you know exactly where he lives and you know something about him. So the question I would ask is that person who is Peter Weinberg the same person as showed up in the police blotter? Is that the same person, Brody?
It kind of looks the same, but
Yeah.
the nose looks big.
It's plausible, right?
Yeah.
Would you be satisfied? Would it be close enough for you to say this is our guy?
If I were to just like look over quickly, yeah, but if I were to look closely at the details, I would say I would need like more evidence as to
What evidence would you need?
I would need like an interview or something of what
something, right? Well, but the social media people didn't need that. Not only did they go after him, they named him, they outed him, they said this is the guy who did this to this girl and so on, and named his employer and so on. Not only did they do all of that, but then somebody said, wait, it's not him. It's actually John Damsky, an ex-Maryland cop who lives 10 minutes from the spot. And so the rumor got going that, look, the only person who could be this angry would be a police officer. And what we need is a police officer who is somewhere near where this happened. And so what they did, again, is they started searching for this guy. And they found him. They said, from what people have been saying, this is him. It looks like Captain John Damsky, a good fit, same watch, they said. Here's the thing. Police actually ended up talking to both of these people, and neither person was there. In fact, what happened was Park Police ended up making a mistake. They said that it happened on June 2nd, but in fact, it didn't. It actually happened on June 1st. And so all of the data that they were running off of was wrong. The fact is, neither of those two guys was anywhere near the trail on June 1st. And so police ended up having to do a recall. Police ended up saying, look, first of all, the date was wrong. Second of all, it's not these guys. Let us do our job. Get off their backs. It's not them. But here's the thing. By the time police got involved and said, it's not them, okay, leave them alone, both of these people had been dragged through the vigilante. And he had been accused in 500,000 social media posts, and Weinberg was falsely accused in over 1 million. And to this day, if you were to look up either of these people, you would find them falsely associated with assaulting that little girl. And they didn't do it. There is the harm. the lasting harm that comes with not just fact checking, but bad fact checking and rumor mongering and passing along information that you purport to be true, but it's just simply not true. These guys are damaged, and there's just no way to stuff a million false accusations back in the genie bottle. There's just, you can't get it back. So when we come back in 45 minutes, we're going to dive much deeper on investigating photographs and investigating videos. And we're going to show you how to investigate the background, where a photograph came from, how to use metadata to investigate the photograph. By the way, the same metadata, you can also investigate any document, whether it's a spreadsheet, Word file, anything that comes from a computer or a phone has a metadata trail. So we'll investigate the metadata trail, and I'll show you how to do that using a number of different tools. And then I'll give you a peek at the future. It's extraordinary what's ahead. How difficult will it be to tell the difference between real and fake in the future is a stunning revelation. So we will do that in 45 minutes in part 3 of our misinformation seminar.
Al, thank you very much for educating us and for depressing us at the same time.
Well, look, I mean, it would be depressing if you didn't now have this information. I would hope that it enlightens and makes you feel stronger about, first of all, it should make you, I hope, feel stronger about the work you do. I mean, the work that you do teaching young people how to become better consumers of information is vital work. It's almost the most important work you could be doing, because it fits across every single thing that you teach, whether it's science, whether it's math, whether it doesn't matter what it is. Without critical thinking skills, none of that matters, because it's all just factual information with no context. So I think it's the most important skill of journalism, for sure, critical thinking skills. But I also would say that it's the most important skill of your sort of living through life, is not to fall for everything that comes along, but to be a great consumer of information. You learn how to learn, essentially.
Al, thanks a lot. Take a break. We'll see you back in about 45 minutes. Thank you,
Sure.
everyone.